Mr. Carlos Perez. Long time no see.
Yes, yes. Thank you for having me. It's
Of
great to see
course.
you.
Of course. Thank you for being here and thank you for creating a space. I mentioned to you earlier, I wanted to reconnect with you because you were one of the people and have been and continue to who have impacted my life. And so one of the things that I was able to do was create this book for you called Moments Worth Remembering. And in fact, I remember vividly gifting the book to you. I think it was over Zoom or Google Hangouts, one of those platforms. And I remember so many of your family members were there,
Yes.
which was really fascinating to see because you, along with I think two or three other people that I've been able to do this through kind of a form of Zoom. It was really special to do it because it just showed how much you were loved, how much you were cared for. And so I was kind of curious to maybe relive that moment a little bit. What was that like? So first, I don't think you had any clue that this was coming to you, right?
I didn't have a clue. I had the tiniest inkling just moments before going down the stairs, and maybe that was that precognitive intuitive piece or something starting to come in, because I really couldn't wrap my head around what am I having some. The way it was presented to me by my wife was, so it would be really helpful if you are home and present for a little call or a little meeting. I'm like, okay, and I just I hadn't seen. Sometimes if there's like a family group text going, we have like a meeting to then finalize plans or things like that. But there wasn't anything happening that would make me think anything like this was happening. So definitely the surprise was there, and it was just in that moment, a moment of no words to describe, because I quickly was looking at the names and the faces of everyone who was there, and it just was like, wow. Thank because there was an experience with Steve Gamlin's
Yes.
reveal. It was just, it's one thing when you see someone else have it, but then when it's you, I could see why he was at a loss for words for himself too.
Was it overwhelming to be able to receive all that at once?
I am happy to say that it was not overwhelming. A few years ago, it would have been overwhelming because I certainly had more resistance and really got in my own way with receiving, whether it was receiving a compliment, whether it was receiving a recognition, anything that was related to receiving as opposed to giving. And I know I've been doing a lot of work around that, and I know that I've changed in many ways. So it wasn't overwhelming. It was just a moment of, you see, do you remember? Do you realize? Like, yes, like another layer, another level of, you are loved. You are worthy. We love you. So yeah, not overwhelming, thankfully.
I've experienced similar stuff, and I'm glad that you've been bringing up this concept of recognition and not maybe having the time and space and the energy to receive compliments, because I've gone down a similar journey in my own life. I think I would even say it wasn't until the last couple years where I've really been able to accept a compliment. I found that throughout my own journey, and I'm curious to hear about yours. For me, receiving things like thank you was not really ever a challenge, but words, I love you and I love you for this, it took a while to adjust to and to receive. And I don't know if it's because love is so powerful, and it's just one of those things where you almost can't help it but to receive it with more than just words, right? But like your whole body. And I know in Steve's case and in your case and some of the other people that been able to create this for, it's been a similar reaction. It's just like this overwhelming sense of, wow, this is what it means, this is the impact I've made. And to some degree, I think it's also important to acknowledge words can only go so far, right?
Sure.
So you might be able to
Yeah.
hear or
Yes.
read certain words and then be like, oh wow, I never thought about it in this way. And so how one perceives any of these instances, it's really interesting. When do you think in your life did that start to shift? Did the concept of
Yeah.
accepting compliments become so much more than just, oh, it's so much more than a sentence?
Oleg, I can tell you exactly when that shift began. So at the start of 2016,
Mm,
I mean, really, it hasn't been that long. I'm 46 years old, and it's been a 6, 7 year journey. I started going to and then learning from a shaman to help support my personal life and my professional life. And one of the key exercises we had to do was to take a close look at our relationship with giving and receiving,
mm-hmm,
looking at the different areas in your life where perhaps you are either abundant or deficient in giving and receiving. And wouldn't you know it, it was like looking at a mirror that could show you the reflection of something you couldn't see, no matter how many times someone would have told you. When you had to do that inventory and log it down and write it down, it just dawned on me how quickly I would deflect a compliment, a words of appreciation, or anything.
mm,
If you said thank you, I would quickly say no, 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 thank you, no, really, no, you. And it was, I could hear myself and feel myself blocking, gratitude, appreciation, love.
mm,
And so in the shamanic tradition, that's indicative of a person having some imbalances with their earth element. So I started to do some earth elemental work and really remember the first time that I stopped and paused. It was during a group sound meditation in December of 2016. And at the end of the session, I always would ask if anyone had questions or comments they'd like to share. And there was a woman in the back who said, I just want to say, I loved your voice. Your voice was so amazing. I mean, it was like she kept going on and on, Oleg. And I would feel that, like wanting to
mm,
hide, and then just checked in and asked myself, can you allow yourself to receive?
mm,
And I did something very unconventional. I stood up from my place so that I had the singing bowls and everything. I walked up and over to her, and everyone's sitting down, sitting upright rather on the floor. And I walk up to her and I got down on my knees like 2, 3 feet away and said, thank you. And I'm going to take a moment to let that sink in. I'm going to drink it in and breathe it in. And I could tell people were like, what is going on? It's just the weirdest thing. It wasn't like, oh, yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. And I paused and paused for what felt like several minutes and didn't offer anything back, like a sense of reciprocating or, thanking them for it. Was more like, I'm going to take that and receive
mm.
and own it and sit with it and be with it. And I could feel like little tears running down my face. I was choked up. I went back to the front and started doing like a teaching about receiving and how often are we quick to. It was amazing. It was so interesting. And that was like a major shift to break the cycle of not receiving.
That's surreal.
December 2016. Yeah, crazy.
What
And
was
I,
block what was blocking it before? Like why was
yeah.
it a challenge to receive to begin with?
So looking, so this whole earth elemental investigation
Mm-hmm.
is certainly one that has been happening in a layered version, and each and every time you become more and more clear of the true root cause of that disconnect, because I believe that it is our inherent like right, to receive. It's what restores vitality. It's what brings life. We can't just give without
Mm,
receiving. That's not sustainable. That creates depletion. That creates a very fiery consciousness where, you know, vitality is low, threshold is low, capacity is low if we're not taking time to receive. And so for me, it was more rooted in this, I'll call it dysfunctional empath, where I felt like I had to always be the rescuer
mm,
for everyone's suffering, and not putting value to what I needed, what I wanted, and feelings of unworthiness that were, tied in with that. But for me, it really came from never understanding that I'm not here to put out everyone's fire, but I can hold space for them and give in all these other ways and make a conscious effort to receive so that then I could give,
mm-hmm.
versus it is in giving that we receive. It's like, for me, I have a little bit of a different relationship to it. And even with work, before a client says anything, I take a moment to just tell myself something that I really like about myself. Just like a quick moment of me receiving, giving to me to receive, so that then I can give to others from like a full cup versus an empty cup or leaky cup.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Hmm.
I also wonder if, to some degree, this whole um, misconception that gets created, and correct me if I'm wrong, or help me fill in the gaps here, but around the professions that we have, right? The professions we are pursuing is very much in the space of helping other people. And I know for me, it was very true. When I was first starting this, I felt the same exact way, that I had to help solve everyone else's problems, put out everyone else's fires, and then only to realize that, oh, really, I can't really do much of that. All I can ever be is who I am, and then create a space for other people to ultimately create an opportunity for other people to be able to find the same thing, right? So that was the big shift that I realized. It's like, okay, it's not really about operating from this place of I have to have the answers or be the answer or the solution, but
Hmm.
more so just creating a space for people to find the same thing. And I'm wondering, you've been in your space just a few years longer than I have in my space. And I'm curious, like, do you find that that's just the natural progression that people go through in starting out thinking that, okay, I have to have all the answers, to then realizing that I don't have all of the answers, and all I can ever do is just be in the moment, and then from there, whatever answers people find within themselves, that's the value, the purpose of that space to begin with?
Agreed. Doing this work now for as a practitioner for the last 20 years, it's been really interesting to see the different ways, but the same aspect of how people come to a realization
Mm,
in some way, shape, or form of this model of being everything for everyone seemingly works for a certain amount of time or
yes.
seemingly works in certain situations. But when it doesn't, then what do I say? What do I do about that? And it like almost fractures and fragments, creates fragmentation in like the soul of a person when they feel like they cannot do for others to help them from whatever issues or challenges may be going on. Oleg, just today, I mean, I'm as we're talking, it's so fascinating, but never a surprise to me, the focus of this conversation at this moment, with the very distinct theme with my first two clients of the day. One
Mm-hmm.
was six, one is 69 years old, and one is 20, and they are both showing up with the same piece of,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what else to do. I don't know what else to do. I've tried it, and it's all connected to this foreign relationship with self care,
Mm-hmm.
self love, recognizing their worth, their value, and connecting it deeply to my ability to help others is what declares my value. But when I can't help someone, then what does that do to your value?
True.
So it's just very fascinating how these two individuals, different stages and walks of life, and it's like a collective theme. I think that many people will eventually experience in some way, shape, or form.
Well, I think to some degree, there's also a lot to be said about attachment and the
Hmm.
attachment that many of us, maybe all of us, maybe it's just ingrained in all of us at this point to attach meaning to certain things, to attach labels, to attach experiences, right? To
Hmm.
who we are and who we become.
Hmm.
Where now it for, at least for me, it feels like it truly is a work in progress and the type of work that I have to engage with every single day to be able to detach or learn how to attach different things to it. Now, is a world or is an identity possible without attaching meaning to it? I don't know. I mean, I think that's limbo, and I don't know, maybe not, but like how everything is structured,
Yeah.
it's all based on attached meaning to all
Hmm.
these things, right? So it's only fair to assume that, well, if the door has this meaning, if the
Hmm.
dog has this meaning, then I must have
Hmm.
some sort of attached meaning. And for us, it just happens to be work, right? And how much emphasis we put on that.
Yeah.
Um, I
You
think
know,
there's definitely a
something.
shift in being too, but I don't know. It's
I,
interesting.
one of the things I would just add to that a little bit is that and my elder would always say that everything is relational, and even the attachment you have with something or someone, that relation and relationship with that attachment can change. It can be an ally or an adversary or anything
Yes.
in between. And so it's interesting to, you know, consider this practicing of detachment, which I don't know, and I'll speak my heart. I'm not in full agreement and in full resonance with that as the solution or one of the solutions or answers to detach, because I don't see anything ever being disconnected. Even if we think we're disconnecting energetically, there's still some aspect of that experience or pattern that's part of the collective who you are, your totality. But perhaps something changes within you where your energetic resonance with it is no longer creating a dissonance, a friction, a restriction, a confinement, but rather a neutrality, or even more a constructive, productive, uplifting, sublimating kind of relationship that is now playing a healthy functional role. So it was not necessarily detachment, it was rather attachment via a framework that was in alignment to support, to nurture, to nourish,
Mm.
to to create that feeling of more than enough.
Hmm.
I am more than enough, and it's not defined by my job, my my anything, the car that I drive, the house that I live in, none of that. So, food for
So,
thought.
so it's more, it sounds like more of a reconnection that then gets developed, right? And not
Yes.
disconnect. Because I think I agree with you. I think so much of it is also just based on awareness.
Mhm.
And really, I think it's just becoming aware of some of these things. I mean, even going back to how we started this conversation and the whole thing that we created with you
Mhm.
and for you, that was what was at the center of it all.
Mhm.
Just for me becoming aware that, hey, at the end of the day, I believe this is one of the only things that matters. Now, sure, there's family, kids, and all these other
Mhm.
things, but I think to some degree it all boils down to connection.
Mhm.
And within that connection, it's like then we get to experience all these other things, right? Like
Mhm.
love, gratitude, empathy, and um, feeling of someone else's suffering, struggles, challenges, the joy, accomplishments, all these things. So I kind of just realized it's like, well, maybe it is all about just reconnecting at a certain point. And it's not that you were ever disconnected, maybe just weren't aware of the connection to begin with.
You forgot.
which
Yeah.
also happens.
Yeah. It's absolutely true. And the craving for connection
Hmm.
is what ultimately seems to disrupt, the fires within us, within our psyche, within our lives. We're desperately seeking something. We're craving something. And in the indigenous tradition, it is connection. It is the craving of connection that is the common, spiritual symptom, let's say, that then develops into all the different patterns we see. So yeah, it's interesting that you touch on that, because I 1,000,000,000% agree that it is about connection. And some folks, I remember feeling like I didn't belong, and or didn't know how to connect.
Hmm.
And yeah, looking back, that's a key component to so many things that were out of balance in life, was the connection piece.
Mm-hmm. Do you still experience that? Do you still experience like a lack of connection or lack of belonging? Because I
What I
found for me, even with knowing what I know, it still comes and goes sometimes. And it's just
so
interesting to experience like why does it,
yeah,
why does it still happen? And maybe it's because I'm human and
yeah, probably. And it doesn't happen anywhere near the degree that it used to. I feel like so many things have shifted and changed in my life in the last, really, like, gosh, it started in 2010, but it really catapulted in 2015.
Hmm,
And it's less about belonging, and it's more about, am I showing up as I am destined or intended to be, so that I'm still me, knowing that I belong everywhere and anywhere. And it doesn't
sure.
matter where I am or who the people are. Whereas before, I only wanted to be around those that I felt were like me or understood me. And now it's like I'm seeing and looking for, kind of like Sherlock Holmes or something, and just like, what is the connection between this total stranger, and myself? And I almost, kind of do a little bit of that. Let me see here. Versus putting attention to what's different, putting
Mm-hmm.
attention to what doesn't connect us, even
Mm-hmm.
if there are many areas of disagreement of views or things like that. We're on the same floating, you know, rock in the galaxy, circling around this giant fiery ball. There's a oneness somewhere. And where is it? And what is it? And can I connect with that?
Do you think that always exists? Are you always able to find ground once you start seeking for it?
Yes, Oleg, I can honestly say that. So the whole community piece,
Mm-hmm.
as much as I had community experiences throughout my life, whether it was through church, through school, Boy Scouts, teams, clubs, groups, and things like that, what my elder really instilled in me was this global village concept, that yes, we exist in like pockets. You have your people, your family, the town or the neighborhood you live in, your work family, whatever. But there's this global village, and in village, in in the way a village operates, it's very much this connection that's always there, even with someone you might never talk to.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't mean that I'm having a conversation with them. Like sometimes it's just I'm observing and just watching, and just thinking to myself, that's a brother, that's a sister of mine. We're a soul family. We haven't met, we haven't spoken, but something brought us together in this moment to have this interaction, even if
Mm-hmm.
it never was face to face or hand to hand. You showed up in that moment for me.
Mm.
So yeah, we're connected.
Mm. Well, I know you and I are also connected on many things. Birthdays.
Yeah.
That was pretty wild, actually, to
Yeah.
be able to experience that. When you told me about it, it's like, there's no way that's real, but it's true. Sharing
Yes.
the same birthday, and I was just like,
Uh-huh.
what are the chances? I've actually, I think I'm confident in this one. I don't think I've ever met anyone in my life who shares the same birthday as I do.
I'm grateful that we can have that in our
Like, literally, I don't think I ever have.
Yep.
Do you know of anyone? Do you know of
Yeah,
anyone else who
but
shares the same day?
no one that I have any connection with, like
Yeah,
it's just because through social media or something, you'll
sure.
see these other birthdays, and I'm like, I know we're friends, we're listed as friends. I don't know, I don't have I don't know that person, to be honest, to be completely honest. So no, you're the only one.
We're
Hmm.
listed as friends, but
Hmm.
I don't know if we're friends.
There was a point in my life with social media where I was just, okay, click, accept, 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 accept. And
Yeah.
sometimes it was like immediately followed with a sales pitch message or something. But, yeah, it's, when it shows up, I'm like, I haven't a clue. And
It
I'm okay owning that and saying, I don't know who that person is at all.
it's so interesting, I think, how so many of us build communities and relationships and connections and
Mhm.
friendships, right? I mean, social media for me is a perfect example of a lot of this,
Hmm.
where I think so much time can be built in fostering these relationships, connections, and then just naturally, I think over time,
Hmm.
you stay in touch with someone and you don't stay in touch with most,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
And I think it's an interesting like paradox or dilemma where, going back to your point, we seek connection with many,
Hmm.
only to realize that the deeper connection is experienced with few, right?
Absolutely.
So it's like I haven't fully understood why or how it happens. This desire to connect with the whole world,
Mhm.
only to realize that, hey, at the end of the day, these are the 5 or 10 that I can call right now and
Yes.
have an hour-long call, or
Hmm.
go to their place and do whatever. And it's
Hmm.
just, I don't know. I don't know why one exists. Maybe it exists to be able to appreciate the other.
Hmm.
I'm not sure. Maybe the reason why there's this desire to connect with as many different people as possible is to appreciate the few that we have closest to us. I
Hmm.
mean, business, like, think about how so many of us build businesses, right? I have yet to experience building a business based on one person, one client.
No. Yeah. No.
There's almost this thing that gets taught that, okay, you have to reach out to as many different people as possible to
Sure.
find the people that you are meant to work with.
Mhm.
And it's just a fascinating thing to experience, because it's like, at the end of the day, you can only manage so many relationships and energies, right? Like,
Right.
I mean, I don't know
Absolutely.
about you, but for me, sure, I might be connected to 10,000 people, but I certainly do not maintain that level of connection that you and I have with all
Hmm.
10,000 people.
Nope. Nope.
So it's like, what transpired that desire to begin with?
Yeah. It's for me in the last few years of I've started to learn more about the language of business marketing and things that were never really taught in school. This whole concept of even the language is fascinating. A lead, and things like that, and this whole
Prospect.
prospects and all of that.
You're not my client yet. You're
Right.
a prospect.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And it's interesting. It's almost like the framework requires a level of a transactional beginning, completion, journey well, and I've read about these different models and ideas where you continue to invite people as clients into your ecosystem, but the connection is not so much rooted in the same things as like what we were initially talking about, which
Yeah.
and you make a point that it does provide the contrast to help you settle, or at least for me, it provides the contrast of, wow, what I have in this person really is all these different
Mm,
things that I I, I don't think I want to have, at that level with everyone, because there's a depth, there's an intimacy, there's a trust, there's a knowing. I do believe that at a certain level, we we want to be seen and we want to be heard, and maybe that plays a part in wanting to always have the next connection.
sure.
But do we ever show the whole self to everyone? Absolutely not.
Huh.
I think it's only a select few that are part of, like, what we might even call a soul tribe. These are your people, and perhaps you've walked the earth before with them in some other life, and there's a recognition and a remembrance. So you're getting even deeper and deeper and deeper into that relationship and connection. Whereas for others, it's just, oh, here's another soul that I want to see and hear, and maybe they want to see and hear what I have to say.
Hmm. How did you know when you met that person? How did you know when you met that person in your life? Someone that you just sensed
Yeah,
that, like, oh, I was connected with them for
you
this
know,
many years or
as
lives.
you're
And
yeah, as you're asking, it's different now. I don't think I had that level of awareness years back. I definitely did not consciously did not
hmm
have that level of awareness. And even now, Oleg, there have been moments in the last few years where there was the first encounter, and it was powerful. It felt ancient. It felt kindred spirit. Whoa, this is like it's moving. It's emotional, but it was to fulfill some purpose for a certain time, and then journey well until we meet again, kind of thing.
mm,
So I don't really have that definitive answer, because sometimes the intensity of the initial interaction felt like, oh, this is someone that I'm going to probably have a relationship with for many years to come. And that wasn't the case. And then with others, interestingly enough, it's like orbits. We're on different orbits. And sometimes those orbits have a certain, speed, size, direction. And every time you connect again, that relationship gets even deeper and deeper. But then there's a movement apart, and then it almost gets even deeper because now there's something different about each of you. And that's more of what I think I have now with the people that I say are like my deepest connections. We
hmm
just keep orbiting back, and we pick up where we left off. We hear that a lot when you talk about with certain relationships. We picked up right where we left off after, a couple of years. Yet it's there's it's depth instead of surface or superficial.
hmm
Mhm.
Do you find it challenging to accept this concept? Because I'm at the, I would say, looking at my own life right now, I'm at step one
Mhm.
of however many steps there are
Mhm.
to that. And for me, definitely is a bit of a challenge to be able to accept the concept that here's a person that I connected with, here's a person that I felt there was tremendous amount of synergy and potential and all these other things with, and yet within 24 hours or a week or a month, we are no longer in touch.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to understand this on my own terms. Well, how do I make peace with that? How do I keep moving forward? Because really, I think that's the only thing one can do, right?
Mhm.
Is to find their own path towards moving forward. In your experience, and considering that you have a couple years on me in
Mhm.
being able to practice and live
Mhm.
this, how
Mhm.
did you come to terms with that? How did you come to terms with, hey, yes, this was a great connection, and then within 24 hours, it's not there.
So mostly through the practice of this heart coherence technique through the Heart Math Institute.
Okay.
I had worked alongside a life coach who used this and introduced me to it. I then went on to learn it and become certified in it. And it really just gradually. with practice, the more often I did it, immerse myself in any kind of interaction and feeling okay. I don't want to say I felt great, but I felt okay with, I may never see this person or talk to this person again. What a gift that today was the day where those
Mm,
orbits came together. And I think, and this is where my mind goes, Oleg, I think about the thousands upon thousands of choices that each of us had to make from the moment we had capacity to make choices for ourselves
to meet.
to that moment to happen. Like, who am I to think that I have that degree of control and say to all of the forces of the universe to maintain that and never have that separate again? And it's just nothing in here was saying like, oh yeah, you can. And so instead it was, how much more can I be grateful for
Mm,
that moment, so that if something were ever to happen and I never heard or saw from that person again, I know that I got to show my whole heart and be with them as much as possible. And it's not an easy practice,
mm,
because certainly, we have certain attachment that is a little more painful when we don't get to continue to have that and we thought we would. And so really that coherence technique and just coming back to that gratitude, conscious practice of gratitude and appreciation, and verbally letting that person know too, just that to me helps then create like a space so that I can feel comfortable even if I don't have frequent recurring interactions with them. Because otherwise, I mean, I've been on the receiving end where someone's reached out
mm,
upset and unhappy with my not frequently reaching out to them and checking in on them and so forth. And, it's interesting. It's like you don't know what you don't know till someone brings it to your attention.
I've been
So
there
I
too.
took I took
Mhm.
time to sit with that and be with that, and said, I was really grateful that they could be comfortable enough with me to let me know how they felt based on my inaction, which was inaction, because I do in fact take time to just be, and I'm not going to always be in regular interaction and connection with the people that I'm closest with and so forth. And those that have known me longest know that that's kind of how I am. I will take time when I need to. It's not even withdrawal. It's really enjoying time to just see where I'm at and be where I'm at. And if I'm always talking to other people, how am I going to really have that space and time to just sit and be with what I need to sit and be with? So having that conversation was a way for that person to, it's like the four agreements, don't make assumptions.
Mhm.
He was letting me know how he felt based on how I treated him. And I then was able to say, this is how I am. And it really has nothing to do with you. So now that because there was that thought of, did I do something? Did I say something? What did
Mm.
I do? What did I say? And like, you've done nothing. I think you're an amazing person. And I tell people that. And so having those conversations were helpful to just let that person know that my not reaching out regularly was never a reflection of anything they said or did. And now they learned more about me and my process, and how disconnecting helps me to reconnect.
Mm. Well, it's also so true. Where do I begin with what you just said? The first the first thing I would say is I really love that you brought up this whole concept of the thousands of decisions that we each make within our own journeys, and then ultimately somehow one thing connects to another, and we're able to experience this time in space, and then from there it may or may not be experienced the same way again. I think there's a lot of wisdom within that, and that is having that perspective. It just reaffirms with me of how small I really am in the bigger scheme of things,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
right? So putting it in the perspective of, oh, okay, I'm not the universe. There's a significantly bigger universe that's happening outside of me
Right.
that's helping create a lot of this reality. And the other part that I wanted to mention is when you talk about the person coming to you. So first, from my experience, it takes a lot of courage to be able to actually voice that to the other person. I've been on the other end of that,
Mhm.
right? I've been the person who reached out to other people due to not having received the same level of contact from them.
Mhm.
In fact, even now I'm learning a different dynamic, and that is I have a handful of my friends that I'm very good friends with, but just due to the way that they operate, they don't respond in the same time frame that
Mhm.
I tend to respond, or some of my other friends tend to respond, right?
Mhm.
So this goes to text messages, this goes to phone calls, whatever the mode is.
Right.
There's like a day, a week, sometimes a month before you hear from them. And I remember at first when I became aware of it, I was very judgmental of it. I was very judgmental of the circumstances. I was very judgmental of the people behind those circumstances, simply because I wasn't willing to put myself in their shoes. I was putting them in my shoes. So I
Mhm.
was thinking, okay, I'll respond to your text message within the hour. I'll send you the email within the half hour. I'll call you right now. So why couldn't they do the same? And I think it was through a lot of compassion and empathy, which I think much of what you also hinted towards, that I was able to reframe a lot of that thinking and ultimately put myself in the position where I started to think that, okay, everyone is experiencing life. I think that's the truth amongst all of us, right? We're all living.
Mhm.
And the other truth is that we are all living on our own terms.
Mhm.
So you might be at work right now. My friend might be in bed right now.
Right.
Another friend might be halfway across the world right now.
Right. Mhm.
Another friend might be going through a hardship right now, right? So there's just all of these circumstances, and I think I'm finally beginning to live and practice this concept of living with compassion and grace for other people, because we are all living our own separate lives. So for me to sit here and take all these things personally, man, Carlos is not responding. He must not like me.
Mhm.
What do I need to change about myself,
Mhm.
without giving you the opportunity to express? I think it's just a never ending cycle of trying to
Yeah.
change things that may not need to be changed,
Agreed. You know,
right?
you're I'm not sure if you've ever come across or heard of or read the book The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Mm-mm.
It's a very short, quick read. It's a book that summarizes the four agreements that are part of the Toltec tradition. It's a group of natives in South America where the four keys to happiness or the absence of suffering in life is the following: always do your best, be impeccable with your word, don't make assumptions, and don't take things personally. And most people, it's those last
The
two
last two.
that really jam us up. And so, because it comes up almost weekly for me here. And I recommend the book left and right and say it's really helpful to learn more of how the author explains the don't make assumptions part and getting better understanding of on our own everything you've just said. Like it's like you read the book and we're summarizing the chapter on don't make assumptions, because it really helps to understand that we see things as we are, not as they are,
Yes.
and how anyone and everyone treats you is really saying more about them than it is about you, but how you respond and react says everything about you,
Mm.
and so forth and so on. So you're preaching some wonderful wisdom, and I would say that to the viewers, listeners, a little side plug for the Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz would be a great book to keep in your toolkit for ways to help navigate through complexities of relationships, connections, and making the most out of life.
Why do you think so many of us forget the last two principles?
There's this inherent expectation state with how the observer is observing the observation, and this feedback loop that we're not talking about. It's not tangible, but
Mm-hmm.
the perceptions, thoughts, and beliefs of the observer are instantaneously shaping that observer observation relationship and feedback loop. And so, one, without having asked, agrees to the assumption that if I am seeing it this way, then therefore everyone else sees it this way, even if I know that everyone's different and not everyone was brought up the way I was brought up, schooled the way I was schooled, and what have you. And it really is part of that ego observer framework. And that unless someone ever stops and pauses for a second to just notice themselves, because
Mm-hmm.
once I think you notice yourself and become a little bit more aware, you create more wiggle room and more space for other ways of being to coexist. And it doesn't mean that it's wrong, bad, or anything else. It's just it's another shade of the same color,
Mm.
But it's part of that when we're in such mental awareness from that place of the I. It's assumed that everyone else is sharing the same I. And yeah, I think, the older you get, the more you start to appreciate the multiple I's and you know, I don't know where I read it once that said that there is no me, there is no you, there is only we. And there's just all these shades within that spectrum
It's
of
pretty
how
true,
something's
actually.
seen, you know?
It's very accurate.
Yeah.
I think
Hmm.
at a certain point, it truly does become just that.
Hmm.
Because even you is just a perception of you through the perspective of us,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So
And but yeah.
it's kind of wild to me to even think about. I really like how you just put this whole process within the last, I don't know, 30 seconds to a minute, where we're able to process all this information, right? On whatever degree, whatever terms, put it into different compartments, pick and choose from it whatever we want to process and say next, and then be able to carry on whatever form of dialogue. That to me is just so fascinating. I mean,
Mhm.
literally, that's all happening through us, within us, and
Nanosecond,
yeah,
just yeah. Mhm.
and we think we're controlling it, but really, like, I'm not controlling anything right now.
Mhm.
Maybe the only thing I have is to some degree control over what I choose to say next. Because I think there are times you can kind of, right now I'm choosing to say this next word. Right now I'm choosing to say this next thing. But that's not even true all the time.
No.
Sometimes you say things and like, man, I wish I would not have said that. And how often does that happen, right?
Yep. Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. It is fascinating. You're right. It's intriguing. It's a mystery. Just when you think there's a predictability, it's gone the window. And so, yeah, it's just, I certainly, my nature is to speak rather quickly.
Sure.
And I practice slowing it down to notice more, how did that just feel,
Mm-hmm.
not was that the right thing to say,
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. And it's so that's the whole, other elemental practice of mineral, which is really a slowing down, a pausing, like, the quieter you become, the more you can hear like what needs to be said
Mm-hmm.
versus what should I say or what should I do. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but again, it comes down to what you had mentioned much earlier about just awareness,
Mm-hmm.
becoming more aware of what you were unaware of.
Mm-hmm. Well, so much of it, I think, is also what I've learned is autopilot dialogues, right?
Yes.
It's in the only reason why I say that is because I was once that I still am that. Sometimes I've by no means conquered. I've just become better at becoming more aware of those situations, So now I'm able to slow down and think through and
Mm-hmm.
understand, okay, this is what I feel from this conversation. This is the kind of the next logical step or
Mm-hmm.
emotional step that feels within, the journey. But I think that level, I remember to this day having these conversations like that, where it almost didn't even matter what you had said because I already had written the script in my head. I think I might have even joked with this with Gamlin. I said that no matter what one would say, I already had a New York Times bestseller just ready to
Yeah,
fire
lined up,
away.
ready to go. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Intro, opening chapters, here are the characters. And it was also fascinating to observe how many other people were doing the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
because within the hour the conversation would end and no one would say, you know what, I don't even know what we spoke about.
Yeah.
So I think to some degree maybe all of us are doing it, have done it in some situations, but slowing it down, gaining perspective of all of this, how we even started this, it's like that is, for me, is the path towards more meaning, deeper connection, like getting beyond the words, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even the same thing with reading these, or in your case, like reading a book, it's like same exact thing. It's like, yeah, you can read the words on paper, but the experiences that are attached to all of those words
Mm-hmm.
are memories that you get to relive and re-experience and go on a journey within your whole body.
Yeah, Moments Worth Remembering was pretty much like a time travel
Mm-hmm.
experience, if you will. And it's even just now as we're speaking, just to I'm looking away from the camera on the laptop to just you know instantaneously thinking of this one inscription, uh, and just going back to my time with that person.
Mm.
And it's just incredible. Like it's really neat how, and I don't know, maybe other people have a different
Mm-hmm.
way to process or to be with that, but for me it's like the so I turn the page, I look at the name first before I read what's written, and so I'm thinking of that person, but then it's like I'm going on a mind trip and an emotion trip to recall like the time spent together with that individual, like the where it was, when it was. And it's visceral, it's emotional, it's physical. It really is like multi-sensory, so to speak.
Mm.
And you just get to have a different level of gratitude and appreciation for that person as well. And then of course, can I allow myself to receive what they've just written?
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe they've never actually said that, even if I kind of thought that. So now to
Mm-hmm.
see it, it was like, wow. Like,
Whole
thank
different
you.
experience.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of names, context, and words, where do people find you? What can people, how can people engage with the work that you're doing? Obviously, for anyone that's going to be watching this, they can see a picture into your life and into your work. But for anyone who
Mm-hmm.
will only be able to hear the voice,
Sure. Well, a lot of the work that I've done has thankfully been archived online. So even if someone can't come to see me in person, there's always something that they can access. The easiest place is always through my main website, which is backinmotionpllc.com. And from that site, you can access things like different sound meditations that I've done, um, YouTube videos on shamanic journey work and different fire rituals and things of that nature. So I love how, the times it's kind of interesting. The times we're living in do
mm-hmm.
allow for a different type of connection that I never thought I would have, with people in places that I've never been to. This is just fascinating, to think about that and to hear from them later, the impact that connection had and how it's helped them. And then that makes me feel even more good and yummy inside,
Mm,
that I'm on my path, that I'm doing what I'm here to do, and technology no longer keeps me bound to who I can help or who can help me. So
mhm.
yeah, but from the website backinmotionpllc.com would be the easiest way to find where I'm at.
Well, someone once said, and I don't remember the person. I'm sure. I'm assuming you might have heard a similar thing that we may never know the impact we have on other people, and we may never know the people we have impacted.
Yeah,
I think it's so true, especially in today's day and age, because
absolutely.
you don't know. We don't know how these things travel. We don't know who's listening. We don't know who's seeking it, because every
Yeah,
single person is at their different chapters. I mean,
yeah.
I would say at every chapter of my life, I was seeking different type of information, different type of people, different type of frequencies, right? So
Mm-hmm.
person that you might be seeking, like even from your example, the two clients you worked with, one in their 20s, the other one in their
Yeah,
60s, like
yeah.
very, very big
Mm-hmm.
and small
Mm-hmm.
age gap at the
Yeah.
same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And both relatively seeking the same thing,
Yeah.
just
We
in
really are
drastically
all
different chapters of
connected.
their lives.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.